Hello, everyone. We're going to get started in just about a minute. So we're going to play some music while everybody starts trickling in. Also, feel free to drop in the chat where you're calling in from.
I love the song though, Michelle. So rock and roll. I wonder if we asked AI to generate it in a different style of music, what it would come back with.
I don't know. I don't know if I want to change it though. I can appreciate the sound for sure.
Yeah.
For anybody that's not aware, this is the actual ITAM music song that was created through AI. I'll drop in the chat the lyrics or I guess the YouTube link so you can get to it if you want to later.
Yeah.
All right. It's coming to an end, so let's go ahead and stop this. And I'll drop in the chat really quickly or where that's coming in from.
Yeah, we're spanning the country and up north in Canada, we've got someone joining in from, so welcome.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still
I
think the
see.
furthest, at least from where we're located, guest that I've seen was Switzerland. So
Yeah. Yeah.
anyone is
I've
further than
Costa
Switzerland, be sure to
Rica,
call it
seen a
out.
couple outside of the US. Yeah. Um, Seattle. Okay, California. Awesome. Awesome. So, Rich, you want to say where you're calling in from while I get the
Yeah.
deck moving in and kind of introduce yourself?
Definitely. So, hello to all the familiar faces. For those who haven't joined us before, my name is Richard Cheek. I'm a solution consultant here with ServiceNow, joining in from Long Island, New York, where we are finally getting rain of a measurable amount. We needed it very badly. So yeah, I'm enjoying a nice, cool, rainy day here in the Northeast.
Awesome. Well, I'm enjoying nice sun, but a cooler day here in Houston, Texas. So we're right at 69, 70 degrees today. Bit chilly for me, but loving it, of course. And we actually have a special guest. So I'm going to kind of introduce somebody really quickly if she'll participate. But this is my new puppy.
Hello.
So she was just taking a nap, and her name is Phoebe. So I'll let her go back to sleep. But I figured I would show my honorable guest, just because everybody loves puppies, right? Tell
Oh
me, tell
yeah,
me who doesn't, right?
everyone's gonna
So,
come for the dog now. Next time, I'll make sure that my pup's
right,
happy.
right. Yeah, you need to introduce your puppy for sure. All right. So, and I guess we should say, well, I guess we can jump into it here. So, Rich, do you want to take safe harbor, or
Yeah,
I guess?
yeah. So if you've been on the calls before, you've seen this slide, it's safe harbor notice. So, we may present some forward-looking things in nature. I don't think we've got actually all that much on this call. But if we do talk about anything coming down the pipe, don't make any investing, purchasing decisions on that information. But with that said, why are we here? What are we doing with this webinar series aside from a nice excuse to drink wine on a workday? We're really trying to build a great practice around asset management and a community to support that. So, thanks to everybody who joined from the New York World Forum that I may have peer pressured into coming onto the call today. But we hope that everyone's feeling the community from these calls. We know that we enjoy them. It's something we look forward to doing every month here at ServiceNow. But again, just trying to build that community and share our experiences with asset management on the ServiceNow platform. So with that said, again, it is an
Drop your
excuse to
wine.
drink wine today, right? Michelle, what are you drinking?
So I picked wine based on the bottle as I did last time. So last time was a Halloween themed bottle. This time I chose to pick something that was animal related since I was going to introduce my puppy. I couldn't find any puppy one, so I found this kitten cat one you would call. And I'm going to try and not butcher the name, but it's a Ryan Hessen, 2022 Ryan Hessen Riesling
Oh, a
from
Riesling.
Germany. Riesling. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for correcting me.
Germany's known for good Rieslings, from what I understand.
I did a little bit of research on and it sounds like it's, I guess it is part of their wine country over there,
Mhm.
where this is from. So let's see. And I will tell everyone, as I told Rich, I always taste it before I get on because I never want y'all to see an ugly face, but it's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's a bit tangy, I guess I would say,
Uh-huh.
like some citrus in there for sure.
Yeah,
But
I hear a lot of folks say, "Oh, Rieslings are too sweet and blah blah blah," but I think that especially the German ones are a little drier, right? Maybe that's the tanginess.
yeah, I would definitely not say this is one of the sweetest ones I've had, because I do like sweet.
Mhm.
It's a bit drier on the drier side, but it's still good.
Yeah. Awesome.
I'm sure I'll finish a bottle.
Awesome. Awesome.
What
Well,
you thinking, Rich?
I picked out something different. I use this as well as a way to try new things. So I grabbed an orange wine today, um, without really knowing what orange wine is. It's not a rosé for those calling in at home. And the good old Wikipedia says that an orange wine is something where the skin is left on the grapes as they ferment, which gives it more of a color than a true white wine. So it's using white grapes and the skin is left on there. But yeah, let's see what it tastes like.
That is an interesting color. I don't know if it's as red as what it's showing
Yeah.
on screen, but it looks,
Oh, it's
yeah, okay.
pretty
Yeah,
amber.
yeah. I think
Um, yeah, it's kind of fruity, kind of sweet, kind of tart, kind of all over the place. It's not bad. I don't know that I would drink it all the time. It's probably not a great rainy day wine as I'm drinking it and thinking more about it, but I didn't say what it was. It's a Kiki and Juan, and it's a fun little logo on it. So yeah, not bad.
awesome. Yeah, feel free to drop suggestions in the chat if there's something that there's a wine out there that you really
Hmm.
like, and you would, suggest us trying it. Again, me and Rich are kind of getting into this whole wine thing, so feel free to drop
Yeah.
it in there.
And I will say we have looked at some of them. It's often hard to find wine in different parts of the country depending on the distributors around. So we're doing our best to try and get them in, but it is kind of difficult. It's not like I find beer is easier to kind of find, or hard liquor you could find across the country a little easier.
Yeah, and keep in mind that we are at like a $20 cap, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
it
This
has
is
to be
budget
cheap.
wine.
but
Uh,
uh but again, we do like to hear that every once in a while. I wouldn't mind popping
mhm,
a wine bottle with my husband or something and enjoying
mhm,
something probably a little more on the expensive side. So if you
mhm.
have suggestions, let us know.
Yep.
But let's dive into why everybody's here. So
Hmm.
this session, we decided, what, let's come in and answer questions that you have. A lot of times in our sessions, we've asked you to give us suggestions on what to cover, from a perspective of, what you're interested in. But today, we just want to kind of dive in and try and answer the questions that you have, which are, there are a lot of good questions out there.
Oh yeah.
A lot of good questions that are kind of all over the place. So we tried to do our best to categorize them and make sure that it makes sense with the flow, that we're not just
Hmm.
spitting stuff out at you randomly off in left field. But and some of them were very similar in nature. So those are ones
Hmm.
that maybe we are going to do some demonstrations on and kind of dive into those a little bit more deeper.
Hmm.
But keep that in mind as we run through these. And it's not off limits. We did cut off the questions on the 19th, I think, Rich.
Yep. Yeah, a
Um,
couple days ago.
just to give us time to prepare for this. But if you have questions that aren't going to be answered or aren't answered in this session or have come since then, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll
Hmm.
answer those at the end. Also, keep in mind there were a few questions that maybe were directed to our product team.
Hmm.
Any of those questions or suggestions, we'll be passing that on to our product team and won't be necessarily answering those here because I
Hmm.
think they were more like suggestions, not necessarily questions.
Hmm.
And then there were a couple I didn't understand, right? And I think they were just more specific to your environment and your use case. So we might be reaching out to you one on one and asking for a little bit more elaboration. So With that said, do we be
And
ready to go? I'm sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
just to add on to that too, Michelle, the
Yeah,
questions that were kind of suggesting features for the product, I believe in our support portal, there is a way to submit ideas. So if you do feel like something is missing from any of our solutions, feel free to message either your ServiceNow account teams, or go into that support portal to submit those ideas. That's where our product teams go first when we're looking at, what our customers are asking for future releases.
yeah, good point.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think it's the idea portal within the customer portal, but
Yeah. Hmm.
good, good point. Okay, so what you'll notice is as we're going through these, at the top we put in blue, which probably was not the best color since it's blue against blue. I didn't think about it that way, but
It's pretty
um,
contrasting.
well, some of the slides were white, and then I turned everything blue. So,
Hmm.
anyways, we're just gonna go with it, and hopefully, I will read them out loud if there's any problems with you being able to actually see it. But the questions are at the top, and then the supporting information is at the bottom. And we
Hmm.
will send these slide decks out afterwards as well. But one of the questions was, what are the biggest and earliest obstacles organizations face when implementing SAM and HAM?
Hmm.
So whenever I talk to customers from a practitioner standpoint, a lot of times I say, this is how I did it. These were things that I was taking in consideration whenever I was standing up my program. And they're agnostic to the tool, right? It's
Hmm.
more around the framework itself and identifying processes and stakeholders and all that. And so this is kind of some of the strategies that I've put together. There's tons out there. I'm sure Rich
Hmm.
has his own strategies, right? There's a bunch of different strategies. But these seem to be ones that are reoccurring themes that I've, based on research that I've done on my end. But with this, I wanted to call out some of the obstacles, right? Specifically to the question. So I think obstacle one is stakeholders. A lot of times people don't think about how many people influence asset management or need asset management,
Hmm.
right? And whenever I say need it, like need it to be able to perform their job on a regular basis. So this could be anything from security, right? Rich, I mean, I don't know about you, but I would say at least 80% of my calls has somebody from security on there that's
Hmm.
wanting to vet the tool, understand how they can leverage some of that
Yep.
information. Um,
Yeah, you can't
but
secure what you can't manage, or something along the lines they're always saying, right?
yeah, yeah, I hear
You
that a
don't have
lot.
visibility to.
Yeah. Procurement's another one.
Hmm.
Legal. Who else? What else can you think of, Rich?
HR teams, onboarding, offboarding. It's a
Good.
big deal getting
Yeah.
day one readiness for hardware and software.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think there's an area of the business that we haven't spoken to really for asset management. It is
Yeah.
often paired with the IT teams because it is IT equipment, right? But a lot of the time they're coming to us because other folks in the business are trying to drive, outcomes.
Yeah. And it's the thing about having them have a place at the table. I like to use table and seats as an example, but letting them come in and have awareness of what's going on and have some say into it is they now are a lot of times some of them are gatekeepers in their own format, right? So like
Mhm.
procurement, they're the ones ordering the stuff, right? So they're the ones that are getting those requests right at the front of it. Last
Mhm.
thing you want to do is be policing it after it's already in your environment. So you want to bring the procurement
Mhm.
into that conversation so that they can be aware of the processes you're putting in
Yeah.
place and help enforce them, right? So that's
Yeah.
just kind of one example.
Yeah, one of the
And
great
that,
things I've seen happen there is like a new software request, and not in the sense that I need new software on my device, but I want to go out and buy new software, and including the procurement team in like, all right, well, what do they need to get that done? And kind of working through the process that way. So just ideas out there, like creative ways people are using the platform to manage software without necessarily managing software, right?
without policing it, yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And the second one, and I'm just going in order, I wouldn't say that these are priority one over the other. I'd say they're all pretty in alignment. The other one is aligning it to business needs. A lot of
Hmm.
times our executives have defined what's important for them for the year, the 3 year, 5 year mark. If you can align what the asset management to those business needs that have been, vetted or identified further up the chain, it becomes easier to put processes in place and actually make sure that they stick, right? So
Hmm.
if you have executive alignment, to the business needs, to your outcomes, they're going to be helping with making sure that things get put in place to drive those outcomes, right? So, the third one down is a phased approach. I would say this is probably one
100%.
that everybody gets hung up on, right?
Yeah.
Everybody boils the ocean. They're like, turn it on and let's let it roll. And that's not how that's not how you ever want to do any kind of project, let alone an asset management project. So figure out what's important to you today. Go ahead, Rich.
In the past life, right, at working with implementation partners, I'd like to say every project was a success, but we saw pain points for the folks who were willing to say, these are our, critical things that we have to get going first and phase it in, right? We actually did a webinar series a little earlier in the year where we spoke about success goals on the ServiceNow platform. That's something that I wish I had as a tool in my tool belt, 3-5 years ago when I was trying to implement the solution in terms of what we feel is, guided there. But again, those phases are going to be up to you. So they should be driven based on, bullet points 1, 2, and 3 above that, right? That's going to drive your phases. So, as you kind of go through these, if you're identifying, let's say your top 3 to 5 publishers that you have trouble managing for, that's a great phased approach.
Yep. Yeah. And I forget that you're from that partner perspective, right? Where you see it, you've seen it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I have a small fleet of seeing this from a practitioner standpoint, but Rich has really been out there and gotten to see it on a massive scale. And so he should probably be talking to this slide more than I should, and I'll let you add input. Maybe I'm missing the sleeve here, but the other thing I wanted to call out, and I put it kind of off to the side because it's not really an ITAM strategy, but one of the pain points that I hear time in and time out is gathering historical information, such as contracts or entitlements, on the software asset management side, right? So when we talk about SAM has 2 components that we need to understand. One is what's discovered, right? What's out there in your environment, and 2, what are you contracted to use? If you don't have those entitlements in a nice, neat, orderly place, right? And it doesn't have to be neat. As long as you have it, right, and you can pull it all together, it makes life so much easier. But a lot of times I'm talking to customers that have been using spreadsheets over the time, and their, data is stored in SharePoint, or it's shared in a procurement system. It's stored in somebody's email. All over the place. And then pulling it all together can be a really painful process, but it's required, right? It's required, again, tool agnostic. You need to understand what you're entitled to use with that contractor before you can, move forward with, are you in compliance or not? And then ultimately optimization.
Yeah.
So
And this is something you could get started on before you're, a SAM Pro customer, if you would, right? When folks are asking me, what can I do today? Go comb through your spreadsheets, your SharePoints, your outboxes to find out what you really own. Once we have that and we upload it to ServiceNow, it becomes a lot easier to manage that, neat, clean, and tidy data. You've got a good process, a good place to store it.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I talked to a lot of customers that are like, okay, we're on we're going to do a roadmap, and ITAM is in our roadmap for next year. And I'm like, start looking at entitlements today, right? Start pulling 100%. That together today. So never too late or never too early to start.
No.
So we spent a lot of time. So let's move on to the next question. What are some best practices for HAM, and how does that help ensure compliance against regulatory standards? So I put them kind of side by side, and I went out, I used ChatGPT to get together some of these frameworks, although some of them are, I know probably more than the back of my hand just from doing it. But, we'll see those off to the left side of it. And so ITIL, ISO, Corbett, NIST, ITAM review is something newer that I've started becoming more familiar with around the framework and certification within ITAM itself. FFI feed was something I lived in. I used their security handbook to define what my ITAM framework looked like. DORA, Rich, I think me and you've had many conversations recently about DORA coming up and how customers are trying to make sure that they're compliant to DORA. So these are just a few, they're not all. Some of them are frameworks, some of them are standards, some of them are regulatory requirements that have kind of frameworks or outlines around them. But how do we support that when you're talking about it in HAM, right? So the question specific to HAM. And one of the things that came to mind for me was workflows. So we have a lot of out-of-the-box workflows that are ultimately helping drive the life cycle, right? So that life cycle up here is what, one, you need to understand what's in your environment. I can guarantee you every single one of these is at minimum, you have to know what is in your environment, right? But then on top of it, some of them are you capturing certificates of disposals, right? How are you disposing of your assets in a regulatory way, right? Onboarding and offboarding and reducing risk of a angry employee that leaves the company and has assets in their hands, right? And you didn't receive those assets back. So those are just some of the examples. I don't know, Rich, anything else that you would like to call out around this specific question? Or
I think even if you don't necessarily have to adhere to a regulation, someone in your organization is talking about this, right? Any industry is going to have something. Higher ed has their own regulations, right? But I think utilizing these workflows are ways to kind of remove the manual effort or the mistakes that can happen from, let's say, managing out of a spreadsheet. And that spreadsheet could just be a spreadsheet or using the platform and just updating the fields manually. That causes a lot of room for error. And the idea of most of these regulations is we want to remove that place where errors happen. So as you start to move the asset through its life cycle, right, you request a new asset or there's an onboarding event. It's time to refresh that asset. Everything is auditable and traceable in the platform. It all can go tie back to the asset itself, right? You can get the visibility to all of the different things that have happened to it on the record in ServiceNow. So I think it's extremely powerful, right? Most of these regulations are your process is as important as the action, right, Michelle? So
100%.
this solution really starts to give you that process.
Yeah. And just to call out, I think 2 months in, Rich, we did a regulatory compliance and how HAM and SAM can help you meet those, right? And we kind of went down some of the examples of turning on the audit functionality within the platform and capturing some of the lifecycle events that are going on with it. So if there's more questions around this, we recommend that you go to our website, scroll all the way down to the bottom, look at additional resources, and there's some videos around that as well.
Yeah. So I actually want to answer a question live real quick before we dive into this other one. Somebody submitted a question. Yeah. Should a best practice be to utilize physical asset tags? And if so, should they be a unique ID separate from the serial number? Or is it better to make the serial number the asset tag number? So I'm going to give you my perspective as someone who's scanned thousands of asset tags or had to have folks read me thousands of asset tags at a service desk. I think that they're great. There is a bit of management that has to happen during your receiving process to slap a tag on a device, but it makes the speed that you can pull up information about that asset much quicker. Typically, an asset tag is going to be a string of a few numbers. So if you do have someone calling in, right, maybe it's somebody who struggles with technology or not, it's just easier to say, hey, there's a tag that says, ServiceNow and the number 12345 on the bottom. Read that off to me, get it in. So you could service it easier that way. Receiving it and scanning it is easier too, typically. So if you've ever had to receive assets, you know that often barcodes are truncated and combined into very, very small labels. So to scan that and not hit other barcodes, I like asset tags. So that's my flavor to it. I would probably suggest not making it the serial number just to be able to be easy to read. Typically, those are very long and a mix of characters, numbers, and often small type font out there. I would suggest just coming up with that. You can order asset tags from different companies, get asset tag printers. They often have security features, functionality kind of built into there. You could take it to the nth degree and do RFID tags, right? Some folks get crazy. They put RFID tags on all their devices with beacons, and you could see them move in and out of places. That's what I've seen, Michelle. I mean, anything else you want to add on that before we dive into this little demo here?
Yeah, I was laughing because I was going to say, as an end user, please don't make me read the serial number to you because I am blind and those are small, right?
Yeah.
So I do agree with that end user perspective of, hey, I want to call in, I want to tell you what asset. I have, maybe have multiple assets, and I need to be able to tell you which laptop it is specifically.
Yeah.
Me trying to read that I would give you every wrong
Yeah.
number out there. The other thing is, I would say, when you start getting to larger quantity of assets, you'll start seeing overlaps within serial numbers, right? Usually not within the same vendor, but just serial numbers that tend to overlap with each other. So start thinking down the road, does that make sense? Asset tags can be a pain, though. I will say that.
Oh, yeah.
I worked for a school district as well a long time ago. And we used asset tagging, not just for tracking, but also to track which funding it came from. So because we got different kinds of funding, but kids pulled those off left and right. So, it was just another thing for them to tinker with in school. So
yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, but I talk to customers that are kind of in between. Like every workshop I do, that's one of the questions I ask. And I usually get about half the room that says that they do it and half the room that doesn't. So I don't think that there's a wrong or right answer. You ultimately define your own process in your environment and your needs.
Definitely.
Good question. Okay, let me go back to the slide. So the question is, we're going to jump through a demonstration here, but the question is, can you demo distribution channels? And this actually came from one of our partners. So let me run through that really quickly. So just to explain what distribution channels are, along with service locations, because they're both go kind of hand in hand, but a distribution channel is where are you going to pull inventory from for a specific stock room, which could be a warehouse, personal stock room, things of that nature. And what it does is a distribution channel kind of puts up the guardrails and says, hey, we don't want to ship from all the way over, on the East Coast for something that's on the West Coast because the shipping just doesn't make sense. Let's pull from inventory that's closer, right? So it kind of puts that guardrail up. Very similar. Service locations are almost the same effect in the fact that it says that this warehouse can service these specific locations, right? So again, trying to reduce the shipping process around it. So I'm currently on my Southern California warehouse. If I come over here to service locations, you can see I have 0, and then I have 2 distribution channels, right? I'll show you how these are going to take effect as we go through a request. So I've just to speed up time, I created a request out there. This request is for Abraham Lincoln. So let's go ahead and take a look at his, oh, you know what? I have it under favorites. Trying to make it fast. So Abraham Lincoln, no, I don't want to save his password. His location, so this is where we're pulling from local stock. His location is San Francisco. So I'm going to copy this for later. We'll go back over here to the request, if it's going to work for me today. And we can see here, Apple MacBook Pro, there were approvals that were needed. They already approved. So let's go through and source this request. So all I'm doing is just running through a normal request process, but I wanted to show how we can do this using distribution channels and service locations. So you can see right now, I need to get 1 MacBook, but there's 0 stock and 0 transfer stock, but I have the option to purchase. If I take distribution centers off, you're going to start seeing all of my inventory. So I have across all of my inventory, this could be worldwide, right? If you support the whole world, right? I have 19 items that I could transfer and they would transfer across, but I still don't have local stock. So now let's go in and change some things around. So let's go into the service center here, or service locations. I'm going to add my location as a service location. And then as we add this, and I go back into that request, I've already made sure inventory is there so that, of course, you can see this whole process all the way through. But if I go back to sourcing this request, I refresh my instance, you're going to see now I have local stock. And the reason is because I'm showing that Southern California is ultimately sourcing or able to source this this based on local stock. So let's say you attached to this warehouse, you have a small office building, right? So, and he was local to that small office building. You just want to consume that, right? You don't want to do any transfer. You don't want to do a purchase order, right? You ultimately want to just go ahead and consume that. You could go through the workflow of consuming. But you've also noticed now our transferable stock has moved down to 6, right? And that's because of the distribution centers. So if transferable stock is 4, and that's because of the distribution centers. So if I take my Southern California warehouse here, and I say 1, and I come over here, it's limiting me to those 2 warehouses. And I have probably, how many warehouse or stock rooms do we have in our environment? Yeah, a lot, right?
50.
So, but this is limiting me to 2, right? So it's telling me that, if you can't source it from here, it might make more sense to purchase it from the vendor and let them pay for the shipping for you.
Yep.
Completely up to you. But what you can also see here on the distribution channels, I cannot get that right, is here you can see that these are inbound. If this was also an outbound, you would set it up through the other location, and it would automatically show it as an outbound. But you can also rank these. If you want to be able to say, hey, source from this one first and source from this one second, you can do that. And just setting these up is really simple. You come here, you pick the warehouse. It's already picked for me. I'm going to pick which warehouse I want it to be sourcing from, and then rank it, and then save it, and it automatically saves. So that's really quick and dirty showcase of how to use distribution centers and service locations to, again, just kind of reduce the cost that's associated with shipping, along with just sourcing it locally to help speed up the process, right?
Yeah, and this might not be something that if a customer has 1 or 2 locations, maybe 1 stock room, 2 stock rooms, they're not going to utilize this. But if you're well distributed, you have a 20, 30 different locations across the country or the globe, and maybe folks, you want to put rules in front of them because they might not know it's a good idea or a bad idea to transfer it from one place to another. You're starting to provide that accountability, or that put the rules around where you can actually get equipment from.
Yeah. All right. Do you want me to pass over to you? You want me to finish the slides, and then
You could bring the
take it?
slide deck up. That's fine, and then I'll steal the screen over in a minute.
Perfect.
All right. So next up, we had a question around the service catalog or fulfilling requests, and it was, how can we present generic models for users to be able to request from the catalog? For example, a USB headset, and track specific models, a Logitech H390, in the procurement and ham modules. So I think there was a few different ways. Michelle and I were talking about this, trying to get really to the root of what we're trying to get at for this question. But at the surface level, if you're looking to fulfill like a specific model, let's say you always have these Logitech H390s in play, you could actually, you can publish them to the service catalog, right? That'll have the model's name there. There's nothing stopping you from going and just changing that to USB headset. Your community, your employees, your staff, they're not going to care what that model name is, but they'll know what a USB headset is. So you can rename anything that is, in that related catalog item to do that. This is a screenshot reflecting that. The other thing that you could do is kind of build a custom catalog item for a generic request. And then, somewhere in that flow, maybe take something out of a consumable count. So there's a lot of different ways you could flavor this. And I really think it just comes down to, what your business is trying to accomplish with that.
Yeah. It was funny because we were kind of chatting back and forth, and there's different ways to do it, like what Rich was saying. And I was just like, what's the best practice? And he's like, well, it really all depends on how ultimately you're trying to provide the service to your customer, or to your end customer, I like to say, your employees, right? So, but this is just kind of one example of what you can do, and a screenshot that goes along with it, but very simple to ultimately get to that end result that you're trying to get to. So.
Definitely. Awesome. So next up, we had questions around, what are some of the best practices for Ham Pro when using a third party for fulfillment? And we've got a few answers for that. So I think in Xanadu or Washington, I think it was Washington, D.C., right? We came out with Zero Touch Refresh. And then in Xanadu, we've now released Zero Touch Request. And these are prescriptive workflows that we have to offer, where you can integrate with those different third parties for fulfillment. So it gives you all the touch points where you may need to go out and talk to a vendor to receive stock, or place an order and then receive that into your environments. These take it to the point of where that laptop never hits your employee's desk. It goes right, I'm sorry, it never hits your service desk or your fulfillment center's desk. It goes right out to those employees. So you could do these refreshes for single assets, multiple assets, these requests for single assets, multiple assets, but it just provides you that kind of streamlined process to get something from the point of a request to fulfillment. A lot of our third-party vendors do partner with us at ServiceNow too. So if you do have some major vendors that you work with frequently, it might be worth reaching out because they also may have some integrations into the ServiceNow platform as a way to kind of expedite this process and fulfill assets out there.
Yeah. And I wouldn't say this is one and the only way, right? But this
Mhm.
is one way that
Yep.
ultimately, like we use this at ServiceNow, and when
Mhm.
we need to do a refresh, nobody at ServiceNow actually touches the device.
Mhm.
It's completely sourced through our third party and sent directly to us. So this is the most, I would say, the most efficient way of doing
Mhm.
things, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So now I'm going to steal the screen here in a second, but before I do, we had a lot of questions around normalization, including one that was kind of posted in the chat before. So I'm going to walk us through a few lenses of normalization here on the ServiceNow platform about hardware and software, and then wrap that conversation with how we can maybe clean up old asset data, what features and functionality we might have in play for that there. So with that said, I'm going to steal the screen, Michelle. I'm going to replace the current share and fire it away. If you could let me know when you see my screen. Do
Uh,
No?
I'm
Cool.
seeing the panel. I don't see a screen.
There we
Can I
go.
try
Let's
again?
try it again. Share.
There we
There we go.
go.
It like froze up there for a second. Anyway, all right. So we're going to start off with software normalization and kind of how that functions in the ServiceNow platform. So for folks who have been on our calls before, you may have seen this screen, but if you have not, this is our license usage workbench, and it provides that 10,000-foot overview, that single pane of glass for all of your software publishers. So if we go drill into someone like Microsoft, we're going to see all of the different products underneath that publisher and dive into a specific version here. So if we click into a software model, let's just take SQL Server here in this example, we're going to get some information about it. Now, normalization is driven off of the discovery models that are found out there. So as software is being discovered into your instances, normalization is going to run against that. This normalization is driven off that content library, right? So SAM and HAM both have a content library. I think it's 7 million or so records in
A
total.
lot.
Now, it's a lot of records out there. But this is where that normalization happens. So those different discovery maps align to the discovery models, and you go out, crawl those environments to normalize your software. You'll see they link up to installations. These installations are located out on configuration items. So as we keep going out with the web, right, we get to see that information. And once these discovery models are normalized is when you're going to be presented, now I have too many tabs open, with your software product life cycles. So that's driving towards that information about the software when it's becoming end of life, end of support as the vendors publish it there. So I kind of just went through that, Michelle. Were you able to follow along? That way we could confirm maybe the audience is following along with that.
Yeah, I think I definitely follow along. I think the important thing that we want to say here, one, normalization again happens at the discovery
Yeah.
model. So
Mm-hmm.
that's where you will see when it's actually normalized based on manufacturer, publisher, and
Mm-hmm.
edition. I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think about it. So that's where the normalization function actually happens.
Yep.
But because we map the discovery models to the software models, that's
Mm-hmm.
where you ultimately see on the software models that lifecycle data,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Because most ITAM, SAM admins are living at the software model. They're not really
Yep.
going into the discovery model, right? And so that's why it's mapped in that direction. But
Mm-hmm.
again, discovery is where you're going to find that normalization
Mm-hmm.
function happening.
Yep.
So again, the question was, how is hardware normal? Do you want to show the hardware side and then we can jump back through the
Yeah.
questions and make sure we
Yeah.
answered them?
I do want to
Okay.
just answer one more that got
Okay.
posted live earlier on in the call. So hopefully that you're still here with us. But the
Yeah.
question was, can you provide some examples of what is included in the normalization engine in ITSM standard and that expanded capability that is part of SAM Pro? So what you're seeing here is part of SAM Pro. Again, it's driven by that content service, the content library. In ITSM standard, all of the normalization would have to happen manually. So you would have to go out there and create those different discovery maps to align to your software installations, to then align to a software model, right? So there's a lot of hoops that need to happen, and it's extremely manual. ITSM
Mhm.
standard has some normalization around company information. We did talk about that, I believe, on the ITOM call. So if you go over to our website, you could hop into that recording. We hit on that a little bit, but other than that, SAM Pro is really where you start to get uh, a lot of value in normalization because it's largely automated at that point.
And speaking from a customer that went through trying to normalize all of the products in my environment, I can tell you it's a never ending job,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
And I ultimately didn't do it. My admin was the one doing it. But yeah, it was a nightmare because as soon as it was detected in a different fashion, we had to
Hmm.
go through and normalize it. And some of these normalizations, you're like, oh, it's okay. I know what Dell ink is, right? Dell ink is
Hmm.
Dell. But some
Yep.
of them are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? And you're like, what does that normalize to? And
Yeah.
there's a whole slew of trying to figure that out. So
Hmm.
just know that I can tell you this normalization and that end of support, end of extended support was a huge value sell for myself as
Hmm.
whenever I was a customer and being able to use that information. So
100%. Awesome. All right, so then we're just going to dive into hardware here for a second. It functions very similarly to software in that it's backed up by that content service. So if we just dive in here from the start, if we come in, again, this is the hardware asset overview dashboard landing page. We're going to go into it from like a life cycle event. So if we come into everything that is, let's say, end of support, again, it's driven off that content service. And then let's go into a model. So we have our Microsoft Surface Pro 4 here. So this device is something that might be discovered by Intune, SCCM, our agent, whatever it is, bringing that model information into ServiceNow. The normalization that runs is going to look and take a look at the model number and other attributes about this record, and then it will normalize that. So you will know that it's normalized by the normalization status here on the model record. So hardware asset management normalizes against the model, right? So just to repeat again, software asset management normalizes against the discovery model. That's because of versioning and whatnot that rolls into one model. But these hardware ones normalize on the model itself. So here we'll see that this record was normalized. We could see all of the different assets that it's associated to. And then again, that life cycle information provided by the content service in terms of when it's end of support, end of availability.
good point.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we've answered the questions. So the questions were, how is the hardware normalization supposed to work on an ITAM perspective?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Can you describe normalization works in terms of EOL
Mm-hmm.
for both hardware and software? We answered
Yep.
both of those. And then I guess this next question is a two-part question, and we probably want to go ahead and kind of answer it. But what is the best way to clean up old bad data? I think this was they said it was quite old. And
Mm-hmm.
how can Ham Pro assist with cleaning up the asset data?
Yeah.
So do you want to take
Yeah,
that one?
so how Ham Pro could assist specifically is I think the normalization piece. So as you start to discover those models, the content service will start to normalize them and help you make sense of that in some way. Now, old bad data could really mean anything. So it's hard to give a great recommendation on what to do with it without knowing what what's qualifying that as old and bad. But I've seen customers completely wipe out their database and then restart their discovery piece, depending where they are in their journey. I've seen folks do exports to, other like Excel or whatnot, and kind of comb through that data, re-import it, and transform it that way. I think it really just depends on what's wrong with that data that you're trying to deal with.
Yeah, yeah. I would definitely recommend reaching out if you have a partner,
Hmm.
discussing that with them.
Yeah.
If you don't have a partner, like bring in ServiceNow or vice versa or both, right? Let your ServiceNow account executive know,
Mhm.
and they can kind of help you with your assessment, because trying to answer that generically on a call to hundreds of people, we could be giving wrong information to somebody else, and we'd hate for them to do
Mhm.
something to their instance. So
Mhm.
again, we would like to definitely evaluate your specific use cases, and try and make recommendations that way.
Mhm.
Um, all
Awesome.
right. So I think we answered those three questions. So I think we
Yeah.
can move on to the next one on the slide.
Sure. Sure. You want me to share
Uh,
the deck out?
Yeah, while you do
Okay.
that, I
Here.
did want to share something. So Matt actually messaged Rich and I off to the side, and he provided some great information. I think it's something we really need to get out there. Again, knowing that you are also experts in your own use cases, right? So being able to bring and provide information to other customers that are joining these calls are huge. So one of his suggestions is the asset tagging question. He says that he sees a lot of asset tag numbers use host names of the
Mhm.
devices,
Mhm.
which I can say I've used that as well in my experience. But one of the issues that he wants to make sure that everybody's aware of is, for example, laptop 12345. For a company that uses host names is nearly impossible to automate on autopilot and Apple Zero Touch. So
Mhm.
neither of the asset tag nor the host name can match, or the asset tag number should be based on something that is unique and can be pulled from suppliers like serial number. So just be aware, I'm
Mhm.
not familiar with this, but it sounds like Matt had some heartburns around it. So
Yeah.
I do want to make sure we're sharing that information. So thank you, Matt,
Yeah.
for sending that over, and
Mhm.
everybody be aware.
Yeah. And just to knock off a couple more questions, we are monitoring the Q&A as well. Is there any work being done to get ServiceNow integrated with VDI environments so that software can be discovered on virtual machines instead of on-prem? So we can do that today. It just depends on how you're discovering it. I know VDI environments could be set up in a multitude of different ways and different solutions out there. So, depending on what you have set up specifically, I'd reach out to your ServiceNow account teams and they could kind of help best determine how to integrate that into your CMDB. But we can track software that's installed out on VDIs. Your vendors care about them, so we do too. Right, Michelle?
Yeah, yeah.
Another question: Do you need to do you need a model's manufacturer name to be the exact same name as what is discovered from Intune or Jamf? Model manufacturers are typically held in the company table, which does have company normalization. So if you're struggling with that, again, tune into that ITAM Better Together recording from a few months back, talking about company normalization. It should be a way to kind of streamline that and help out with that there.
And model, if you're talking about I know he said Intune and Jamf, so not sure if he's
Hmm.
talking about the hardware side or software side, but
Hmm.
on the hardware side, manufacturer is one of the actual
Hmm.
fields that is normalized.
Yep.
So it doesn't have to be exact. So, yeah. Last question. Do we want to jump through it? I don't know where we are on time, but
Uh,
you
yeah, go
want,
for it. No, go
okay.
for it.
Why is there not discovery models for ham? It seems to be a needed staging table. You cannot clean up the models when discovery just loads it into the model table. If you clean it, discovery will just load it again. So it should be normalizing against it. And once it's identified
Hmm.
and runs through the IRE, right? Identification,
Hmm.
reconciliation, and then it should just associate those other assets to that record. So
Hmm.
I'm not, maybe there's something unique going on
Yeah,
in your
and I
environment.
think I've seen folks in the past, and this may or may not be the case, where it normalizes and you go ahead and change the information up here. Once it is normalized, I highly suggest utilizing the normalized fields in your reporting for things like that. I can definitely see where this question's coming from though, and it honestly kind of makes sense to me. Maybe there could be a hop between discovery and normalization. We can take this back to our product teams
Sounds
and
like
kind of
really good.
philosophize about the best way to do that too.
I was gonna say, it sounds like a good idea portal, you know,
Yeah.
so maybe another suggestion that goes back to the product team.
Hmm.
I'm assuming there's a reason that they chose to do it that way because
Hmm.
our SAM and HAM and EAM teams work pretty well and closely together when
Hmm.
designing the platform, when designing ITAM itself. But yeah, I definitely recommend you putting a suggestion out there and seeing what they come back with.
Yeah. All
All
right.
right.
So did I lose the PowerPoint there? You did? Yes.
Did
There we
you?
go. All
Okay.
right. Can you see,
Yep.
how do we, okay. Awesome.
Yeah. So the next question is, how do we automate asset allocation, including consumables? There's a few different ways that Rich and I kind of talked about. I would say best practice is when you have the program up and going right, is always have employees doing a request process, and that request process very similar to what I showed in the distribution portion of the demo is that request will automatically allocate those devices
Hmm.
based on who's requesting them, right? So you
Hmm.
just go through the request process and allocation is automatically done on consumables and or
Hmm.
assets themselves. So that I would say is best practice.
Yeah.
There are other ways if you know maybe you're trying to get your environment up to date, right? You just turned on HAM and things weren't allocated, blah, blah, blah. One thing that I can tell you I did as a customer was we used SCCM last use name
Hmm.
to update that. I will also say as a customer, it bit me in the butt
Yeah.
because we did that and it overrid everything that we had already worked on up to that point. We had shared
Hmm.
devices and those shared devices ultimately got overridden
Hmm.
and updated based on the last person used. So it
Hmm.
ultimately wasn't right. But
Yeah,
anything else? Yeah.
I definitely that SCCM piece bites a lot of people. It could work if only one person is ever logging into the devices. I think shared devices cause a lot of problems with that there. The other thing I've seen a lot of customers do, and somebody actually at a snug, maybe a year ago that I was at, spoke about this process where they made an asset attestation flow, and that flow went out. I think they did twice yearly, where it, sent folks an email or a task that said, here are the assets assigned to you. Do you still have them? And do you have anything we don't know about? Now, again, not foolproof, but it especially, in COVID when everyone went home, really helped to enhance the accuracy of their asset databases out there. I will also, to tackle the consumable piece, the philosophy is, should you even track who consumables are assigned to? I guess it depends on the value of what they are, but then should they be like a serialized asset that you're assigning? So just always kind of have these conversations. Should we be tracking keyboards and mice to assignment? Most folks probably aren't, but they do track, consumable levels for stock. That way they kind of know what they have on hand for requests and fulfillment.
Yeah. Always recommend thinking about the process that you're doing and why you're doing it. And does it make
Hmm.
sense cost wise, right? Because
Yep.
asset management, a lot of the drivers behind it is reducing costs. So
Hmm.
if you're spending time on a $5 mouse and you get paid $100 an hour, which I don't think any of us should do, right? Does that make sense, right?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't make sense. So yeah, think through that. Quantity wise, though, consuming it, I would definitely say consume it so that way you
Hmm.
know what you have on hand and you're not
Yep.
delaying that employee that gets paid $500 an hour because they don't have a mouse, right? So
100%.
uh,
Awesome. All
so
right.
this is a unique question, by
Yeah,
the way.
yeah. So this one, how can I best use ITAM to increase my customers' visibility as to what products they have and where? Now, this is probably not relevant to everyone in the audience unless you're tracking maybe things outside of IT, like if you're a manufacturing piece or you do support other hardware. This I could draw parallels to this, the enterprise asset management, but from the strict IT use case, right? If there are any managed service providers out there or VARs that are tracking equipment out for customers, this one is for you. So there's a few ways that you can do this. So I'm going to hop back over to the ServiceNow platform and bring that up here. So the first place that I'm going to start out is in a CSM portal. So for the folks listening at home that may be customer service management customers of ServiceNow and have a CSM portal, again, something that is outwardly facing to your customer base, you can track asset or they can track their asset information there. So there's no reason, again, it's all stored in one place in the or it's all stored on the same platform. So you can share this out with the folks as they need to see it. So just as like a quick example of what that might look like, pretend I am a customer, right? I'm in this portal. Could go over to my assets. Now I'm logged as an administrator just for the sake that I could show this, but you can have these lists pre-filtered in the portals to show what you should see there. But we could do something like, show me all of the computers, and we'll say where company is not empty, right? So we could run this out here, and well, I don't have the company there. Maybe I should use account. Let's use account instead of company. All right, so if I was Divinoodle as a customer, I love this demo data. It's got some great names in
Love
here.
it.
I
Yep.
could say, show me all of Divinoodle's assets, right? And it would just have the one here in this instance. So, that's one way to provide visibility to your customers out there. This can be extended to software as well. So if we just say model category is software license, we could run this, right? All that data you could reflect out here if you were tracking it down to the account level, groovy. How do you track it down to that account level? Perhaps you have a catalog item in your customer service portal for a device request, right? That device request, when it comes in, would know the account that it's logged in from. And when you fulfill it, you can use something like Flow Designer to populate those fields. Now, just new in Xanadu, I love that Xanadu is the release name because it rhymes so well. We released this device as a service functionality. And this is where if you are the MSP or a VAR, a reseller, you can track inbound orders for assets to the accounts, RMAs for devices if you're doing those repairs, repair orders. It's really a place intended for the MSPs to work out of. Now, if you're on either side of that fence, you can utilize Service Bridge, which is pretty much an easy button for two ServiceNow instances to talk to one another. I'm not going to get into that here, but you can transfer requests from one place to another. So if you are an MSP and would like to start offering something like this to your customers, it's included with HamPro. And if you are a customer working with a major vendor and you'd like to see something like this, go talk to them about it. Just conversations to be had. But there's a lot of different ways that you kind of slice tracking your customers' assets. This portal is, this is pretty slick. You could go down to each account level and see, what devices are out there. I think we've got
And we
our
have stuff under the
we have our
station.
favorite Netflix, right? Why
Oh,
not?
there we go.
Yeah, sure. Um, you could see demo data coming in and out. Now, this is a plugin that you activate separately. So if you are a Ham Pro customer and you don't care about this, you won't see it. But if you do care about this, it is now something that you can activate. Talk to your ServiceNow account teams. They'd be happy to have that conversation with you.
Yeah, it's out there in the store. So
Mm-hmm.
if,
Yeah.
if you need it, turn it on. Awesome. All right, we got 3 minutes left. We're gonna rush
right.
through the last few.
Yeah.
We probably go a little over, so if you can hang out with us, I think the time slot is an hour and a half, but
Yep.
just because we allow for questions, so we will go over. But this next question, we're starting to move into the software side of the house. So I would like to learn more about automating the license reclamation process.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll talk real high level. And again, this all, some of it all depends on, is this SaaS specific or is this on-prem software? And it wasn't really called out in the question. So I'm going to go SaaS. But, if it's something that's on-prem and you have questions about it, there's lots of resources out there, and we'll be providing resources in the follow-up email. So when you set up a direct integration through SaaS, whether it's direct integration, API, or SSO integration, you'll walk through the process. There's documentation out on our doc site of what you need to do within the other tool and what you need to do in ServiceNow to make that connection work. So once that connection is set up, then you'll start seeing subscription information coming in. It will create the software model for you, and it creates a reclaim rule for you. The reclaim rule is being able to identify and reclaim software that's not being used, right? And that usage could be from it hasn't been used in the last 30 days, 60, 90, whatever you define. Out of the box, we're going to create that rule, and we're going to design it probably 30 to 60 days, I think, are the ones that I've been seeing. We recommend, and this is again within the documentation steps, to go and look at that reclaim rule and define what your process needs to be.
Yep.
So if it's set up for 60 days, but you want to be aggressive and you want to do 30, go in and change that, right? So review that. Once that's been done, you need to create the other half of that component, that entitlement. What are you entitled to use? And then what you'll start seeing is if you set up the reclaim rule, you'll actually have the ability, and I think most of them, to be able to go in and define, you want to see historical information up to 60 days in arrears, right?
Yep.
So you might start seeing on day 2 reclaim candidates that are coming in because you've flagged those. You've had those rules in place and it flags them. So once it's actually flagging those reclaim candidates, then you have the ability to go in and push a reclaim button. I always recommend watching it, evaluating it, make sure it's doing what it's supposed to do. A lot of times when you are reclaiming some of those subscriptions, they might have data that's stored under that user. Some of those vendors allow for, once that reclaim has been done, that data moves to the admin, right? Again, that's dependent on that vendor, that third-party vendor, that and their rules on what they allow and don't allow. But there is a video out on our website, if you scroll all the way down, for SaaS integration, where I actually walk through a demonstration of connecting to Zoom and bringing in a subscription and kind of what that process looks like. So we recommend going and looking at that.
Yeah. The only thing I have to add here is they're not always reclaim. Sometimes they're optimizations. So maybe we're looking at downgrading someone from a premium to a free license, or a Microsoft E5 to an E3 license, right? So those direct integrations are very powerful. Some of them have optimizations, not just reclaim the license.
It's like you knew what the next slide was going to be, Rich.
Oh, did I jump ahead? Oh my goodness.
You knew the next slide.
Oh man.
So
it's too much of this orange wine. I just forgot to click the go button. Sorry.
He said he was going to have the bottle gun by the end of the call, so that he's probably
Michelle, this is being recorded. Shh.
So how can you optimize Adobe licensing if Adobe does not provide usage information? I hear this question a lot. Adobe does not expose it, right? Whether you're in their portal, whether it's an API call, they just hide that information. So the way that we can provide optimization is similar. It's an optimization, right? So similar to what kind of Rich was saying. One of the points is if they're, if they have all apps, but they're only using one of those all apps, and I'll talk about usage in a moment, but they're only using one of the Creative Cloud all apps application, we're going to make recommendations to go out and just buy that single app instead of buying the suite of them, right? And vice versa. The other option is, the other way is revoking users that aren't using it. Now, the way we can capture that usage information that we're specifically calling out in this is, a lot of times Adobe requires you to install software. That goes along with it, even though it's a subscription. So we can capture the usage if your end user management agent is capturing usage. So SCCM, JAMP, I don't know Tanium. Some of the other ones, Tanium, thank you. Where if they're capturing whether or not the user is actually opening the software or not opening it, then you can put those reclaim rules into place and then ultimately reclaim that software based on that. So that's one way, kind of going around the rules of what we can try and do to help optimize in the Adobe front, since they're not allowing the usage to be exposed. So. And then you'll see a bunch of different other options out there for different other products, kind of what Rich was saying. So.
Awesome.
All right. So
we outlined the box.
Publisher packs. What should I expect as part of a publisher pack offered by SAM? So publisher packs are where we start defining, we use this to define those unique software licensing rules, right? What am I thinking? What's the word?
Metrics.
Metrics, thank you. So those metrics that these publishers have gone out and defined for their licensing. So some of the complex ones are like per cal or per processor, per CPU. You get into IBM, RVU, PVU, right? The publisher packs are actually something that comes into play that helps us to help align you kind of, again,
Mm-hmm.
putting some of those guardrails in that says, hey, we've identified this as a software product. Here are the 7 or 8 different ways that they license. You tell us, how did you buy it, right? What was your agreement and how was it licensed in that? So that's what you should be expecting from publisher packs. When you turn on SAM or you do the SAM master plugin, these publisher packs are already turned on for you. If you opt not to do the master and just do it individual, you would opt into each one of these that's in your environment.
Cool.
Anything else that you want to add, Rich? Pretty straightforward.
No, yeah, it's pretty straightforward. It does the calculations for you, right? So built into the metric is go look at the cores that it's installed on and add them up, right, for Microsoft, and extrapolate that out to whichever publisher you're looking at here.
Yeah. Thanks for the people that are hanging on. I know a few people have kind of dropped, but I appreciate the people that are still out there. For the other question, and this was actually a 2-part question, so I just kind of pulled them apart, but what are some of the benefits to cloud cost management with SAM? And so one is managing it, again, manage all of that kind of spend, the asset spend in one location is a huge thing, right? So that's a comprehensive visibility across all of your environment. License compliance, so BYOL, right? Being able to identify things that are licensed, that you've moved that license to the cloud and assuring that you're staying in compliance. Enhancing the governance around your asset program or around just, the spend within your environment together. And then better resource planning, which really goes into the specific slide onto this side, is identifying things like maybe you're making a transition from on-prem to the cloud, and you're trying to figure out which cloud makes sense to move to based cost-wise, right? So we have the cloud cost simulator where it actually shows you, how much is it costing you on-prem? How much would it cost you to move to AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, and kind of give you some projections around that. So those are just some of the examples that I could think of. I don't know, Rich, if there's something else that you could think of, but
I think the only other one, like under enhanced governance. So let's say you do utilize cloud cost management. You see your recommendations for something like right sizing, for example. It's integrated directly into change management in ServiceNow. So you're not swivel chairing from the AWS portal where they might have a recommendation to right size it into ServiceNow to put your change request in, or a third party tool that's doing something like this. It's all in house in one place. So when you enact that change and it gets approved, then it goes and takes those actions for you. So just again, the adherence to process is kind of enforced a lot better, utilizing the tool all in one place.
I'm glad you called that out. It's huge, right? If you're doing change management in the platform, having that automation where it creates the change for you as these things are being optimized out in the cloud is a huge time saver, and ultimately helps you understand what's going on when things break, right?
100%.
9 times out of 10, if something's breaking, a lot of times the change happens without approval, right? So you got to go back and see what happened. Good point. Are we to the end? Yeah. So this is the last question. So somebody was asking, looking for things that might be helpful for our team since we are in the middle of CAM Pro implementation. These are Ranger videos. I should have probably put QR codes for you to be able to go to, but I will share the slide deck again with these links that you can actually go out to. But these are bite-sized videos of specific things, specific features that you might want to use or turn on, or workflows that you might want to investigate on hardware and software. So I'll make sure you get these series out there. There's a few other resources that I'll probably provide in the email after the fact, so probably in the next day or two. But I would say these are probably my #1 go-to. Rich, what do you think?
Definitely. These are our ServiceNow in-house ninjas.
Yeah.
The Ranger teams. So these are definitely good to tune into if you're going through an implementation, if you're thinking about an implementation, if you're curious what it takes to run a HAM or SAM practice. They're fantastic videos to tune into.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, Rich. So so we're getting to the end of the year. It's Q4, it's Thanksgiving, it's Christmas, it's New Year's, it's all of the in between. And Rich and I are going to take some much needed rest during this session,
Yeah.
during this next couple months. And at this point, we will probably come back. I don't know if it's going to be January because we have our big kickoff in January, but it'll probably be February, which we'll do our next session. If you have ideas, anything like that, feel free to, email me. Yeah, send them through email. Again, we have our website. If you can do that there. But we are going to enjoy some rest from the whole webinar thing for a little bit. Another exciting idea. I don't even know if I'm allowed to say this, but we're trying to do a live event at Knowledge next year. So keep your fingers crossed. I would love to meet everyone in person, but we'll let you know more when we return.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody who's been tuning in over the last 8 months or so, right? It's been a lot of fun for Michelle and I. I'm going to speak for Michelle on that. I'm assuming it's been a lot of fun, right? But it has been something we look forward to every month. It's something kind of different that we get to, again, build that community around. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I think we answered everything in the Q&A. There's actually a couple hanging out in the chat. I think, Michelle, if we want to answer a couple more questions and then tie a bow on it.
Yeah, let's see.
All right. So what would you suggest to use for asset tag numbers for SAM Pro?
Oh, that's an interesting one.
It
came up in my last workshop.
Okay, so, then there you go. Go for it.
So I was actually making a joke. I said, who uses I asked the room, who uses asset numbers, asset management tags for software? And I said, I stopped using them back whenever we got CDs and hard copies, and at the school district, they still probably have them, right? Like we have a whole room full of just library of old hard disks and things of that nature. But I actually had a person speak up, and she said she used asset tagging to uniquely identify her purchases for her license, for her software. It was something that was easy for her to identify them and ultimately get to what she needed to on a quick need. So I told her I would stop making fun because she actually had a valid use case, right? Like it was something that was important to her and her team to be able to get to it quickly. And so I would say that's one example is if it benefits you to be able to asset tag them, use them. I did not ask her how she asset tagged them. So I don't know, like.
Well, we have a field on the entitlement record, I believe. You could
I just didn't know if she had like a unique way, I guess, the naming of them, right? Like, did she just go in order 1, 2, 3, 4, or was she using
company name 001, 002? Could work that way.
Or the publisher name, right? Like incorporating that into the asset tag. So it's definitely something you can do, like Rich was saying. It's in the entitlements. You do have the ability to asset tag it if you'd like to. But again, best practices on it, I think it's based on your unique use case and how you would use them.
Yeah. Awesome. And then the last one that I see is if I have old hardware data and add the model that matches the normalized model, what will that normalization do to my old hardware data? So normalization should just be touching the normalized fields in that tab we had shown a little bit earlier. It shouldn't, like if you've made changes to those other parts of the record, it shouldn't update them there. If you have changed model numbers, that could affect normalization and how it's going through the system there. So as with anything ServiceNow related, try this in a sub-production environment first. Work alongside a partner, see what happens there. But it should only write to those normalized fields that are kind of towards the bottom of that model record when you activate HAM Pro.
I think you need to put an exclamation point on that, Rich. I don't think some people understand that. Do not test things out in your production environment. Make sure you're playing around with things in either a sandbox or outside of that production, because I have a lot of calls where people are like, things are breaking, and I'm like, did you try this out first? So really enhance that. Thanks for all the communication out on the chat. This has been great. I'm so glad to see this community really coming together. I know Rich and I had a big heart for this, right? Like we knew that we wanted to get this established. So again, this only is as helpful to us as it is to you. So
Yep.
hopefully this is not a waste of your time and not a waste of ours. And
Mhm.
again, we'll see you next year.
Yeah.
So
Thank you, everybody.
take care. Bye.
Bye. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
First Happy New Year of the year.
Yeah, right. It's a little early. I feel
Right.
like I feel like I should I shouldn't even be on the call. So
Yep. All right.
bye guys.